We're joined with Arnaud Develay. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm fine, thank you, Jamal.
No, man. Thank you for joining me. I gotta get your take as a somewhat of a broad question, but I'll ask it anyway. What are your thoughts on the talks? Are you hopeful? Are you maybe hopeful is not necessarily the word? Are you what are your expectations with these talks right now? Russia, or you can say Moscow, and the United States, Washington, are meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And this comes only after a week of having a conversation between Trump and Putin. So they're moving pretty fast on this issue. People have pointed out their objective goes beyond Ukraine. So there seems to be a lot that they're putting on the table in these negotiations with the idea of normalizing relations between Russia and the US. Meaning, this goes beyond Ukraine. Give me a take on this. Just as a broad question, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, we should take into account that this is the first time high delegations between the two countries are meeting in any kind of format
Mhm.
for literally years, which is in and of itself an anomaly when one considers the security questions that should be tackled and which should be subjected to at least a constant, if not permanent, a communication line between Washington and Moscow. So this in and of itself, I would say, is an achievement and something to feel like optimistic about. Now, as you say, yes, Ukraine is but one of the issues likely to be discussed in Riyadh. And there's talk now about an economic side to the resumption of, or as you said, the possible normalization of relations between the two countries. So obviously, talks are ongoing right now. We could expect a briefing, if not at the end of the day, late afternoon. I would assume late afternoon. I'm in Moscow, so I would say in a couple of hours. And we'll see also if we have somewhat of a framework bearing on resolving the crisis in Ukraine. What we can say is that there's already talks about a summit between Putin and Trump,
Right.
possibly being held as early as next week in the same venue. So, what we can definitely gather at this point is the willingness on both sides to really move fast
Hmm.
and not allow the Europeans to somehow concoct and or create a alternate, if not parallel narrative.
Well, they're
So
freaking out. They're losing their minds.
yeah,
They're in a full blown panic. I'm fascinated by this. And I honestly can't tell whether their panic is real or whether the panic is manufactured. And what I mean by that is, I watched one of the guys cry on stage for rules based order. That is astonishing to me. I've never seen anything like it. I've watched them come up with this idea that Russia is a looming threat and is ready to take over all of Europe. They are saying it. That's what they think, or at the very least, that's what they say they think. And I'm looking at them like they're out of their minds. Russia had like 150,000 troops that went into Ukraine. This idea that 150,000 troops was going to take over all of Europe was always nonsense. And it's nonsense on its face, just on math, right? And yet they whipped up a fervor as if, oh my God, Putin is about to take it all. Do they actually believe that? I look. Sometimes when I'm looking at TV, I can't tell if they're lying or if they just are idiots. What's the truth here? Does Europe really believe that Vladimir Putin is trying to take over all of Europe? And look, and I'm saying this to say, if that was their thought, allowing him to build his military to a million men that are battle hardened was not necessarily the best solution if they really did have this kind of fear of Russia. What's the reality of this?
well, it's part of ideology on one end and political survival on the other. Ideology, why? Because the European Union project is predicated on the abolition of nation state, and so they don't really favor promoting national interest of its own constituents, and they aim to create some kind of off-world, disconnected from its member parts of its parts, its own
Right.
constituting parts entity, a supra mega national supranational state, i.e., the EU, a bunch of unelected grayish politburo of some kind.
R-
And this was never more better summed up than a former Soviet dissident who, back in '04, basically said, "I lived in your future and it doesn't work." And this is what we have now. It's not a coincidence that some of those EU commissioners are former apparatchik from uh,
The Soviet
Eastern
Union.
Bloc
Yeah.
countries, Eastern Europe countries. That's on the east, and on the west, for the Western countries, they are former Trotskyites. Manuel Barroso, one of the former EU commissioner, president of the EU Commission, he's a former Trotskyite. Many of them are former, far left, and they somehow normalize themselves, which is interesting because the green in Germany, which we tend to say, green on the outside, red on the inside, like a watermelon, are some of the most pro-war, anti-Russia, anti-national ideological formation that you see pretty much in power in Europe. And they never used to be like this. I mean, their forefathers back in the 1980s were genuinely pro-peace. Let's recall that they were featured prominently in the marches in Germany back in the 80s against the establishment of US Pershing missiles, intermediate missiles. And now we find people like Annabella Baerbock and her political party in position of responsibilities. And there's almost no more aggressive than those people. At the same time, they are let's call it what it is. I mean, they're idiots. They really feel like you really feel like they scraped the bottom of the barrel, to plug those people and install them in position of. So they function as a sect. That's the old Trotskyite, method, and so they don't suffer any deviation of thought. And at the same time, because they are incompetent, and because the facts are stubborn, and Europe as a construct, their political construct, is becoming completely irrelevant on the world stage, almost like the odd man out. Let's call it this way. And you were right to somewhat allude to it in your introduction. I think the speech of J.D. Vance really threw them into an apoplectic state. Because for the first time, someone with a platform which they can't really go out and criticize is the vice president of the US, whether or not their candidate won. Is the US VP, and he comes out swinging and basically tells them, "You guys are chasing shadows.
Yeah.
China, Russia. It's ridiculous. The problem is you. You
Yeah.
have to look inward. And your own people are completely, subjected to your lunacy. And there's no free speech, which is completely against the grain of what Europe used to be about.
Right.
The last few days, they've shown on CBS on 60 Minutes that raids throughout Germany at 6:01 a.m., knocking on people's doors for a meme posted on social networks, social platforms. Don't where at the same time you have people knifing, like on the loose, illegals knifing, Germans in the street or rolling over them in with a vehicle, ramming through, crowds. So it's becoming too difficult for for them to ignore, and they just don't know what to do. They used to have, the also the what Mike Benz called the censorship complex,
Hmm.
to allow them to get away with enormities. And now this whole thing is being dismantled as we speak. I mean, every single day it's an avalanche of revelations, and the numbers of monies, taxpayers' monies, that is. They're not like philanthropist monies, to name but a few. We thought for a long time the guy was paying out of his own pocket, out of principle. No, he was actually using his structure to somewhat dress up, a pilfering of taxpayers. And what's been going on in the US since 2015, this is about the time when Mike Pence situated, the turning inward of NATO structure, including the censorship complex against their own population. This has been going on for, I mean, on steroids for at least close to 10 years now.
Hmm.
And we've seen it. We've all felt it. This crackdown on any kind of, and this idea that on certain topics, to the extent you remotely bring in, a keyword, it's almost like an algorithm. Automatically, you have this protocol being deployed against you. You're a conspiracy theorist. You what have you. And now we're finding out the conspiracy theorists were right. And so they're back into a corner. That's really what it is. And they're gesticulating, trying to remain relevant. And in politics, it's the art of the movement. To the extent you are not able to fill the space and create your next sequence, because it's also predicated on a lot of media perception. Um,
What
that
do
that
you think?
you're done.
Well, I was just asking, what do you think these meetings between Rubio and Lavrov are about? Like, what do you think they're discussing in that conversation in order to lead up to the meeting between Putin and Trump?
I think they're not going that to be that obsessed about Ukraine again. Of course, Ukraine is going to figure prominently because this is, the hot potato or the live grenade, as some people have been wont of saying recently, that we are dealing with right now. And the shelling of the Chernobyl NPP is another reminder that we've got a lunatic, on our hands, and the guy is just basically. I mean, if he was somewhat not tone deaf to what's going on, he would refrain from provocating, his U.S. sponsors, so to speak. I mean, he owes the U.S. his political life, this guy. And even though the mood is, we're going to be talking to the Russians, and it would behoove you to somehow take this into account and stop, trying to double down on the conflict in any aspect of it. The guy just goes out and creates, incidents which could have ramification for the whole of Europe. I mean, Chernobyl is, we all recall what happened in '86. It spread out all over Europe, the wind through the winds. But he's still going with this sole ammo of trying to say, the Russian did it. Why would the Russian have any interest? They're about to get, credible partners to sit down and resolve this thing, and they're going to do this. It's almost like the Assad thing, with the chemical weapon attack. The guy is basically has secured 80+% of the land that he's presiding over, and now he's going to resort to attack, spraying chemicals against his own population. I mean, but they believe those things. This is the thing. This is what makes those people dangerous: is that they are completely devoid of any imagination, and they resort to the same old, tried out method to try to say, no, look, this is what I told you all about. It's quite worrying, if you ask me.
But Zelensky has been sidelined in this conversation. So is Europe, by the way. I mean, in fact, Kellogg's pointed out that his job is to babysit Europe, which is the funniest thing in the world to me. That it's like he's pointing out, yeah, we knew Europe was going to complain. And so I'm here to have this conversation with Europe to allow them
to massage it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
To massage
fascinating.
them. Yes.
It's so wild to see that that's his job,
Yes.
right? Because people initially were complaining, okay, if Trump is trying to end the war, Kellogg is not the guy to do it. And then
No,
we find out that Kellogg is not at talks in Riyadh. Kellogg is talking to
he's
Europe.
not.
What is it called? Wiskoff. I believe. I think I might be getting his
Mhm.
name wrong. And Rubio is having those talks. And so clearly Europe is not in the conversation regarding what is going to take place in Ukraine. I was playing this British guy who's a journalist and effectively said the bastards are going to do it. They're going to do it anyway. Effectively saying they're doing this over Ukraine's head and they're doing this over Europe's head. So European security won't be decided by Europe. It will be decided by Russia and America. That is fascinating. Ukraine is from somebody, I'm going to take it because it's a great language use, a chip on the table, that it's not the mainstay. The mainstay is a security framework that for Europe that works and that works into the future. Um, I'm fascinated by that. Like, how is Moscow taking this? Like, are they taking this with skepticism? Are they taking this with, he seems to be a partner? Like, what's the media in Moscow saying about these conversations by Trump, or at the very least, the things that Trump has been saying, and for that matter, the meetings that are taking place in Riyadh?
Well, I think the Russians understand Trump's personality, and they can kind of parse through what he says. He will say a lot of things, often completely unhinged sounding like. But they are more interested in what he does than what he says in that sense. So they always remain cautiously optimistic. I mean, obviously, they've gone through the Minsk 1, Minsk 2 accord. They've seen, how brittle the word of from the West as a general concept is. And they will be making sure, if they know what's good for them, that mechanism put in place in the upcoming peace negotiation are such that the next U.S. administration, to the extent we get, some forces who are motivated to reignite the conflict in Ukraine, won't be able to get away with a narrative that favors, their ill intent. So we'll see. But Putin was really straightforward in last week's phone call to Trump as to the long-term security arrangement, as you mentioned, that needs to be implemented. The security arrangement would tend to basically see the US pulling out of Europe and allow the Europeans to basically do what they should have been doing 30 years ago, is forge their own way, and include Russia, because it should be a continental arrangement, and we should have a pan-European security system that stretches from Lisbon to Vladivostok. But with that current political class in place in Brussels, it's difficult to imagine, something along those lines. And Moscow is cognizant of this reality, and unfortunately, unless there's sudden changes in cascade, we may have to wait a while before adults, are able to access to the levers of responsibility there.
Okay, fair enough. I accept that. But it seems, or some of the reporting, is that NATO is on the table as a stick that the US can use in order to compel European behavior. Is that true? I mean, the UN security meeting apparently that they just had with Macron, Germany, Poland, etc. They're, like you said, gesticulating over what to do about the US doing this without them. I guess my thing is, does the US have leverage? Do they have a stick to force Europe? I mean, because the US is talking about normalization of relations. That includes eliminating sanctions. That includes giving the money back that we effectively stole. I would imagine that includes the SWIFT system. That includes all of those things, meaning all of that stuff is on the table, including Ukraine being one of the bargaining chips. Does Trump have the leverage to do what he wants to do in all of this, meaning in the war, normalize relations, etc.? And how does Europe take it if he does go through with it without them?
Well, I think the main leverage is basically the money, the financial leverage. I mean, if for starter they do not increase their contribution to NATO budget,
Mm-hmm.
the US, as he says, won't protect them. and creating a whole new security network for Europe, which would parallel NATO, would cost a bundle, which the Europeans simply do not have, and which would go completely against, common sense in terms of investments, in terms of spending, as a general matter. So I think we're just witnessing again posturing, essentially. But yes, the question of NATO is definitely on the table. Is this something that's relevant these days? And to the extent, we do not really have a new generation of disarmament treaties. Uh, that's, I think, the idea behind the Trump administration willingness to go fast, remove any kind of obstacle. So first deal with Ukraine in a satisfactory fashion to all parties involved, normalize as much as can be normalized with the Russian Federation. We have learned today that Coca-Cola is getting ready to re-enter the US market. So that's a big marker right there. All the Western brands are going to be coming in. This only needs to be negotiated. We're talking about a 1 billion ruble entry tag as far as the Russian side is concerned. So, yes, I think those things are going to go fast. We have also learned today that US firms' withdrawal from the Russian markets have cost them no less than $300 billion the last 2 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
So
Wow.
that's a lot of money. And with the Trump administration, it's all about the bottom line. When they want to do business, they want to cut deals. You know, this is really what this is all about for them. But most importantly, you need to lay the ground for this arms reduction framework, which Trump has alluded to. And I'm sure he's very serious about this because he wants to basically entice Russia and China, whom he expects to catch up in terms of quantity of nuclear weapons with the two top ones within
Mhm.
a few years, to be involved in a tripartite security disarmament framework, which would ultimately see the big three reduce their nuclear armament by 50%. This, mind you, while there are people talking in the US, I mean, at least before the election, about updating the nuclear arsenal. So we really find ourselves at a crossroad here. Do we want to commit financially for peace, or for war? you know,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about hundreds, if not trillions of dollars, literally. And this is, I think, what he wants to create. And if he gets his way at the pace at which things are going, 4 years down the road, we could be looking at a completely different world, really.
Mhm.
So let's hope that this is something that starts moving apace. That's all we can hope for.
Do you see Russia and China doing that? I mean, the reality of it is Trump's, let's say, radical shift in foreign policy also means that radical shift can take place in the opposite direction. And for all of the positives associated with the president being able to do that, it also implicitly has the negative that a president can do that. If that makes sense, right? Like he was able to effectively say, "All right, we have a new foreign policy going forward, full stop," and everybody's head goes into a tailspin. Well, the next president could do the opposite. Russia and China has to know that the next president could do the opposite. So I guess the thing is like, what are the guarantees that this is a new orthodoxy as opposed to this kind of flash in the pan diplomacy? Um, and certainly Russia has to know that that's true. If that makes sense, I hope that makes
Well,
sense.
you're right. There are no guarantees. That's why the deals have to be ironclad on a legal basis. The triggering mechanisms, which would basically point out to a party being in breach of the agreement, have to really be geared in such a way that to the extent Russia abides by its own obligation. And this would also disarm this notion that Russia wants to take over all of Europe,
Mhm.
right? So that's why they are so panicky, because that you can get this put on paper, within the because we want a security agreement. We want a security architecture put in place, as part of the resolving the Ukraine problem. So you could easily provide those guarantees to the European that all the talks they've been having, and this kind of putting forward Russia as the boogeyman, the ultimate boogeyman, is irrelevant. Now they should start focusing on economic policy development and mass unemployment and security for their citizens and civil liberties, which is something that is altogether another a challenge for them, since they have no legitimacy, and it's revealed, it will on top of it be revealed that they were lying about Russia for all those years to those people in Russia and Europe who still might have doubts about it. But yeah, those security guarantees, they can be implemented, on both level, US and Russian. The personnel is extremely competent. They understand the situation on the terrain. They understand all the ramifications, and this is something that can be done. As far as any kind of denuclearization treaties, when we understand that we have enough to blow the planet 100 times over.
Several times.
So it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Is Keir Starmer going to send troops into Ukraine?
I doubt it. With what troops? What troops is he going to use? No, I think this is all like for sure. It's all rhetorics. Like I say, it's we had this somewhat really weird summit in Paris, unattended by 2/3 of those who were invited, trying to remain relevant. It is trying to remain relevant, essentially, and it's really something to a sight to behold. How ridiculous this whole thing looks like. So Starmer is essentially a dead man walking politically. I mean, he has nothing to ride on as far as the UK public is concerned. So it's all posturing for those people who put him in place, essentially. Macron, same thing, trying to remain relevant, which doesn't mean that they are not somewhat, dangerous people. They are, because they're delusional. They are completely enamored with themselves, and they really think that by pulling their resources together, they can somehow, put a wrench in the larger process at work. But I think they are playing a dangerous game, and I think they might be doing this cognizant of the fact that they are on the chopping block, and at some point they will be directly targeted for regime change.
What does Putin get? Oh, I'm sorry. No, please finish.
Yes, because I think in Washington we've decided that we've had enough with those people, and so we're not going to tolerate those electoral manipulations that have been going on for quite some years now, and preventing legitimate parties in Europe to emerge and contribute to a new dynamic, essentially. And so again, it's all about survival. They know that the wrecking ball is coming for them. They know that. Starmer knows it. Macron knows it. Scholz, knows it. We'll have to see what the election result will be next week. But they all know that. And with them, their ideology also, this post-national ideology. So we'll see what happens. It's not just them personally. It's the ideology that those people vehiculate as well. That's on the chopping block.
I'm curious, what is Putin going to have to give in this negotiation to make this work? And I'm fascinated by the question, because for one, he has a military that's winning on the ground, and two, there's been a lot of, let's say, fantasy in what many of these European leaders have been saying. And so you can kind of, on some level, use that fantasy in part of the negotiations that you're having, since that's the fantasy that they themselves have created. I'm fascinated by that. Give me your take on this. What do you think Putin is going to have to give to make this negotiation work?
Well, two things. One, Putin keeps his cards really close to the vest. Second, uh, every single day Russia gets in a position where it really does not need to concede anything, because the situation on the battlefield is the alpha and omega of any kind of analysis in this respect. But if I was to venture out, some kind of carrot and stick prognosis broadcasting, he, Putin could offer some kind of demilitarized access to the Black Sea for exports of areas of Ukraine under U.S. And or EU control. So Odessa would seem to be a good option. But again, this is a short window of opportunity for them to take. And if somehow they show themselves to be untractable, the Russian military is continuing its work, and at some point they will secure Odessa and therefore prevent any kind of access to the Black Sea from
Oh,
Western
wait a minute.
controlled
Wait a minute.
companies.
Moscow hasn't taken Odessa yet. So how can they
Yet.
negotiate with something they haven't taken?
Well, there's still plenty of time.
But see, that's just
Remember
it.
that we cannot have a process that does not include Ukraine, even notwithstanding Kellogg's massaging sessions going on in
Oh,
Kiev right now.
oh wow. So you're saying something else. You're saying effectively that Russia is going to want more than what is currently on the bargaining table, even parts of Ukraine that they consider to be Russian. So in any conversation, this idea of
That's not what
freedom.
I'm saying. What I'm
Okay.
saying is, if Russia does not see its security concerns addressed ab initio in the negotiating framework, which is being discussed as we speak right now,
Right.
Russia will continue doing on the ground everything that it can to secure those interests. And the securing of Odessa would come into those steps, obviously, because fundamentally the Black Sea can never be accessed by NATO. That would endanger, Russian security.
Hmm.
So, to the extent, again, a Ukrainian figurehead at some point is going to have to be integrated into the ongoing process, along with the European poodles. We still have to have an election and resolve the legal illegitimacy of Zelensky. So we need to have elections. Those things take time. And we're not looking at having an election being held in Ukraine until next summer, probably next summer. So right now, the front is about to burst. So the Russians are about to secure the ethnic Russian populated land of the ex-Ukraine. Once this is done, they can focus all their resources to going back and secure Odessa. So yes, there's no need
Uh,
to go very far west, more western.
yeah.
You go to the Dnieper and you stop. That's you've done the job. Now you
So
basically yes,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say. So you think that's effectively the line that
that's
Putin
the
is
line.
getting? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can keep Western Ukraine. Nobody needs Western Ukraine. The Russians don't want to find themselves in the Vietnam guerrilla. What for? You
Yeah.
want to secure the rights of the Russian-speaking ethnic Russian population. That was always the deal about, one of the main requirements of the Minsk Memorandum, later Minsk Accord, later Resolution 2202. We're going back to fundamentals here. And the special military operation is but a enforcement mechanism, which is implied in Resolution 2202, Annex 1, Paragraph 11. We just have to go to the resolution. And it says that every member party to this resolution and or a treaty is bound to take all possible measures to see that the spirit of the accord are accomplished and implemented to the fullest. That's why no one ever declared a war. It's not a war. It's an enforcement. It's a police enforcement, law enforcement operation. That's it.
It may not have started as a war, but when 1 million people are killed, I think it's a war, or at the very least are taken off finish line. I know what you mean. I understand your point, and I accept it. Right, that this did not start off as a war. It started off as a special military operation. It's been inflamed into something else, which is why I want it to end. I find it to be a silly, and I don't mean silly in the sense. I don't want to call it silly. All of these people have lost their lives. I guess that's my point. And they've lost it for something that I can't define as a reason that's relevant to the lives lost. And so, and I hate the fact that my country was intimately involved in doing it, because it wouldn't have happened otherwise. If the U.S. was not a party, one way or the other, this doesn't happen. And yeah, here we are.
The U.S. was not a party to it.
It wasn't a party to it, but it inflamed it. I mean, when you get Joe Biden, or for that matter, under Obama, and they're taking certain actions that are overthrowing the government of Ukraine. Okay, well, you've overthrown the democratically.
Are you talking about the Biden? Yes.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Minsk Accords. Yes.
Right, exactly. It just got worse, and they just made it worse. And it's wild to me now that after doing all of that, we're with you for as long as it takes. We're going to be here. Putin is about to take over all of Europe. That Trump on a dime is like, we're done. Not just done with us, we're done with Europe. We have our own concerns. We need to move and deal with China. That is fascinating. He is effectively leaving them the bag after 5 years of U.S. policy being to make it worse, to make it worse, to make it worse. It's just astonishing to me. Does Europe have enough gusto in order to maintain this on their own?
Again, I don't think they do. Fundamentally, without U.S. involvement, support and promotion, this whole thing is not going anywhere. And so the last 3 years have demonstrated. What we're looking at is the two top adults, resolving it, and Europe being somehow placarded, with the language that's going to be included in the text of the treaty
agreement
of the
Do you think Trump has enough force to push that through Congress? Because Russia is going to insist that it goes through Congress as an actual treaty. At least I think they
we'll
are.
See. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's why I think once Trump wants to move fast before the midterm elections, he knows that time is not on his side from now on. This thing has to be wrapped up as far as his own agenda is concerned by next fall. That's my take on it at the latest.
Oh, I think it's sooner. I think it's sooner. I mean, because they're saying Easter as a wrap-up date, that Trump effectively wants it to be done by Easter. Do you think that's even possible?
Well, but again, we need to have Ukrainian elections first. We need to have Ukraine to sign that deal, be part of this deal. So we need to have someone who is legitimate to sign it. It cannot be Zelensky. Hence, we need elections. So this is the devil is in the details.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, I suppose it is. I want this war over with. And so the fact that he is making moves on it, to me, is fantastic. Democrats are in a weird space because they don't want to acknowledge that this war was stupid and that their team effectively backed, making it worse. It is very odd. Look, I'll tell you, in America, the political space is weird. Most Republicans are against the war in Ukraine. Most Americans are against the war in Ukraine. And that number has only gotten higher and higher and higher to be against the war and Zelensky himself. So Trump has the political space to do whatever he wants on this. And he is uniquely qualified to flim-flam on questions of, are you letting Putin win? Right? Because that's the way it's going to be cast. You're letting Putin win. You're giving Putin everything that he wants. And, after talking to Mark's thing is there's no way an American president is going to be able to accept the terms that Russia is going to lay down in order to end the conflict. I don't think that's true, by the way. I do think that an American president will take it, especially if he just doesn't care about it. Meaning Trump doesn't care about Ukraine. So from his point of view, I just want this over with, however it's over with. At least that's the way I think it's being framed. Even though he is going to want a face-saving mechanism built into whatever takes place. So he's going to want something out of it. And I guess my question is, what is that thing out of it in real terms that he's going to be able to get to save face for whatever deal he comes up with? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. We got somewhat of inkling of this is the discussion or those kind of statements being exchanged between Kiev and Washington on the possibility of the U.S. to take over most of the minerals there. They're going to
Ukraine.
pay themselves on the market. But that's something that's an issue between Zelensky and, well, Zelensky, no, not even Zelensky is not, again, but that's for them to resolve the legality of this. But between Kiev and Washington, that's basically it. Washington's going to take everything it needs and some. It's got to be at least, if we understand, if we go by the figure put forward by Trump, 500 billion worth of minerals, that's roughly 3 times the amount that the U.S. has invested.
On the war. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
From the
your point is
European,
that it's not
yeah.
between Putin and Trump. Oh, I see
No.
what you mean. Your point is,
Yeah.
well, it's not about what Trump gets out of Putin. It's what Trump sells to the American public as we recouped the money for the war. So we're
Exactly.
ending this. Oh,
That's it.
interesting. That is super interesting. We'll see if that works, or we'll see if he goes that route. You're right. He is effectively saying we're taking the minerals. we're a shakedown.
We
We're
own
gonna
you, booty. We own you.
right
You are our.
now. Zelensky has said we're not excited. He has thrown a hissy fit, and he has effectively said we're not accepting anything that they negotiate without us being involved, without me being involved. Because let's be honest, he's talking about himself. I mean, is that true? Like I keep to me, it's like, dude, if we pull out, that's it. Is he right that he can gum up the works in this process if he doesn't accept whatever they come up with?
Well, how could he be able to have the standing to either accept, endorse, and or reject anything that's being talked about when he's not even legitimate?
Yeah.
So whatever, in other words, whatever this guy says between two lines of coke, nobody cares. He's a non-entity. He's just a clown, whirling in the wind, and he's not getting funnier by the day, by the way. And if I were him, I would be actually cautious about my own security now, because there are talks about, a coup against him, or, at least attempts on his life within Ukraine. This was reported last week by, I think, a Ukrainian parliamentarian figure. So if I were him, I would somehow refrain from making inflammatory statements the way he's been doing it. And most importantly, I would refrain from engaging in nuclear blackmail.
Yeah.
Yes. Because at some point, no one, I think, wants to go out of, and take him out. But if he keeps acting like this, he might just have only himself to blame. Of course, it will be made to look like internal score settling, but these days they can make anything look like it's internal.
Oh, you're saying Moscow takes out Zelensky? Is that what you're saying?
No, not Moscow. I think.
Oh, you're talking about
Washington
internally. Oh, you're talking about Washington. If he
Yeah.
stays in a way, of a deal.
Yeah, because you don't cross you don't cross the master. The master has said, "Time out. We're done with this." So why you keep yapping around like what we're saying? Are you tone deaf, man? What's going on with you?
I know you're
You've
an
been a good
analyst.
actor up until then. Keep acting. Keep being a good poodle.
I know you're an analyst when you're looking at this, but are you hopeful in this? And I'm asking, I know that's a weird question to ask because hope doesn't really play into it. But if you're looking at Russian media, they are growing right now. It may, if not indeed in spirit, in the way that they're talking about this. And there seems to be an alignment in regards to what Russia's saying about it and what the US is saying about it in regards to, let's say, the potential to do something big. Where do you stand on this potential of this? And do you have, I guess, a deep-seated sense of something? Even if that something is just, yes, I do hope this goes well.
Well, you have to be hopeful. You have to be optimistic, and you have to not allow those thoughts to percolate through your mind. I'm saying if you're in a position of responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So those people, like I said, and we'll, I guess, close on this. I'll go back to what I said initially: is keep in mind this is the first time, and on that level, that the two countries are talking for
Mhm.
years, while the world was basically falling apart. Had you asked me that question, let's say 4 years ago, I would have been somewhat pessimistic that things could not would not unravel, to uh, I would say, a point of no return. But somehow we managed to make it through those 4 years, and now we have again the willingness to sit down and discuss things on the merits. And so from that point on, it's the work left up to negotiators and diplomats.
Arnaud, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Arnaud Develay, he is Deverlay, I'm sorry. He is an international lawyer specializing in international criminal law and participated in the defense of former President Saddam Hussein, along with former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. In the wake of the Caesar Act, he documented the illegal sanction regime imposed on Syria while living in Damascus. He is author of Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and Fracturing of American Political Consensus. Arnaud, man, thank you for this. You have a good day.